Hey everybody, Tim Albrick here, and thank you for listening to the YFP podcast, where each week we strive to inspire and encourage you on your path towards achieving financial freedom. This week I had a chance to welcome onto the show Derek Borkowski, founder and CEO of Cosmas Health and creator of the Pyrls app. His background includes experience in community pharmacy, digital health, and the pharmaceutical industry. He's a pharmacist and software engineer of Pyrls.com, a drug information website and mobile application for clinicians and student clinicians. Some of my favorite moments from the show include talking with Derek about how and why he built the Pyrls app, what problem he was trying to solve, and how he was able to see that while working as a community pharmacist, and some of the challenges he has experienced in the early days as a pharmacy entrepreneur. Now, before we jump into today's show, let's pause to acknowledge that we're in the midst of tax season. Those tax forms are piling up, and it's time to make sure we have our tax filing and planning top of mind. Now, tax strategy and planning is an undervalued part of the financial plan, and YFP Tax is working hard to help pharmacy professionals optimize their tax situation. YFP Tax is opening up its services to file 2021 taxes for 125 pharmacist households this year. These slots are filling up quickly, so don't wait too long. If you're interested in working with a team of highly trained tax professionals, head on over to yourfinancialpharmacist.com/tax. Again, that's yourfinancialpharmacist.com/tax. Okay, let's jump into my interview with Derek Borkowski, founder and CEO of Cosmas Health. Derek, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, appreciate it. I've been really excited for this chance, Tim. Thanks.
I too am excited to have you on, talk about your entrepreneurial journey, your business, how and why you got into the tech space of pharmacy. So we're going to talk through that on this episode. Before we jump in and do that, though, let's go back to the beginning. Where did you go to pharmacy school and what drew you into the profession?
Yeah, so I think my pharmacy journey actually starts a little earlier than most, even definitively. So I can remember back in as early as 8th grade saying, I want to be a pharmacist. And that's because my mom actually worked at a community pharmacy. And so, when I would go and visit my parent at work, I was like, oh, this seems really cool. The pharmacists she worked with were really nice. And I knew I was already getting interested in science and medicine. And so I remember as early as 8th grade saying, I think I want to be a pharmacist. And of course, what changes, most people wanted to be something when they were in 8th grade, but then they just got interested in new and other things. But for me, every step along the way through high school and then undergrad just kept reinforcing my interest in pharmacy. And so originally, community pharmacy is what drew me into the profession. And so I went to the University of Minnesota on the Duluth campus and graduated in 2018.
So 2018, graduate of University of Minnesota. You mentioned interest in pharmacy since 8th grade. And as we're going to get into throughout this interview, I would say you're on a very non-traditional path in pharmacy based on, what you're doing with running and starting the business, also in more of that tech space of pharmacy. So with that initial interest in community pharmacy in the profession, tell me more about when you realized a more non-traditional path as a pharmacy graduate was going to be the path for you.
Yeah. So another thing on that point is I would say if I had like 9 lives to live simultaneously, I would want to be a community pharmacist in one of them, an AmCare pharmacist in another. And then right away when I started pharmacy school, I remember even first semester seeing all the different things people were doing with their pharmacy degrees that you don't necessarily have exposure to before pharmacy school. And so I got really interested in some of the non-traditional opportunities that I saw right away when we had medical science liaisons from pharmaceutical companies come and speak to us, and other pharmacists doing unique things with their degrees. And so it was actually, I remember one summer I was between years of pharmacy school, I was reading Steve Jobs' biography. And as maybe as like, I don't know, impressionable or naive as it sounds, I was just blown away by this. I was like, by the story of Apple, like, oh my gosh, like they built this, these revolutionary products that, have changed, our society. Are people still doing this? Are people still starting technology companies? And so at that point I had no, background or knowledge about like startups or technology companies, but I was like, wow, is there any way that I can combine, my pharmacy degree with technology? Healthcare seems like an area that needs disruption. And so I started during my 3rd year of pharmacy school, I did an internship at a digital health startup company here in Minneapolis. And, I can get more into what I did next, but that was kind of the beginning of my interest in technology.
So Derek, I want to spend another moment there because I think in my conversation with many, I'm calling, specifically the pharmacy students I'll talk with, they might be interested in a specific area of the profession or perhaps want to pursue something that's more non-traditional, but aren't exactly sure what step to take to pursue that interest a little bit further. And I would argue pharmacy school is such a great time where you can really put yourself in those scenarios and situations, learn more, often for a condensed period of time, obviously not a longer term commitment. So that internship you mentioned at Digital Health, tell us more about how you pursued and found that opportunity.
Yeah, so I remember, so I got really interested in like technology and startups. Like, so the phrase Silicon Valley, that didn't really mean anything to anyone where I'm from, or I didn't really know anyone in technology growing up. But that in particular, I got really interested in. So I started just looking up, like, are there any like startups here in Minneapolis where I was going to be based for the summer? And I found this company called MyMeds, which is a digital health startup that's focused on medication adherence. And so I remember I was just coming back from Pittsburgh where I was doing an internship over the summer. And I drove right to the address that I found on the website for MyMeds. And I was like, oh, it might be a mailing address or maybe it's an office. I guess I'll find out. And so I drove up there and just went and knocked on the door. And there's a few people in the office and somebody answered. And I said, hi, I'm Derek. I'm a pharmacy student. I think I'm interested in technology. Is there anything I can help with around here? And so fast forward, a few weeks later, the CEO of the company called me and said, hey, I heard you stop by and left your CV. Yeah, I think we could use the help of a pharmacy student. When could you stop in next? And so it went from there. So some advice I would give, and I can go more into this kind of what we think might be interesting, is so Mark Andreessen, I believe he was maybe the person who I heard give this advice first, so he's a famous internet entrepreneur who helped invent the web browser. And he talked about this concept of skill stacking, how there's always something unique to be found at the intersection of two, really deep domain expertises. And in particular with healthcare, it's a very like healthcare domain expertise, like, as a clinician is very hard to attain because of just the amount of time it takes, to become a practice clinician like we are as pharmacists. So in my mind, even now, I kind of tongue-in-cheek joke that I'm a 5 out of 10 pharmacist and I'm a 5 out of 10 software engineer. But that allows me to do things that somebody who's a 10 out of 10 pharmacist but a 0 out of 10 software engineer couldn't do, or someone who's a 10 out of 10 software engineer, but a 0 out of 10 pharmacist wouldn't be able to do.
I love that. And that connects with me, right? Derek, as I think about my career journey in pharmacy, I would maybe give myself a 4 or 5 out of 10 on the pharmacy side as well. But, I think about combining that with some of the financial education, passion, and the work that we're doing. You put those things together. And, I think that's a great example of a unique combination. And I would add, I love the concept of skill stacking. The thing I also don't want to overlook and gloss over is just the initiative, right? So, I'm reading right now Warren Buffett's biography, and he was famous for stopping by companies, walking in the front door that he was looking at investing, and just to talk with people and learn more. And the fact that you stop by that office, introduce yourself, and specifically said, hey, is there anything I can help with here as a pharmacy student? Like that type of initiative, I would argue, is certainly not common. And I think something that I'd recommend folks consider and making some of those bold moves if they're looking at trying to get themselves out there of other opportunities that might be there. So skills for sure have to be there, willingness to learn, but also, that initiative to seek those opportunities. Derek, for pharmacists that are listening, that maybe they're considering a career move, or perhaps student pharmacists that are listening, we've talked for a moment here about the intersection of healthcare and technology. Can you talk just at a high level about the types of opportunities that may be out there for a pharmacist that is interested in this intersection of healthcare and technology?
Yeah, so I would just say, I'll start by saying that it's a giant umbrella of different opportunities. And one thing I frequently hear is when I'll meet another pharmacist or someone at a conference and start to talk about what I'm doing, they'll be like, oh, you're an informatics pharmacist or you're an IT pharmacist. And I'm like, close enough. but truly what I'm doing right now is I'm sort of a technology entrepreneur, and I do software development, but it's very different than I should say, like typical informatics, which also I guess is another area that needs to be unpacked. And so, yeah, I'll just speak to one sort of specific area that I have had purview in that I think would be worth pharmacists taking time to learn about. That's data analytics. So I actually do, when it comes to learning programming skills or technology skills, I actually do website and mobile app development, which is a little different, but an area that's adjacent to it that I notice a ton of demand for and need in is pharmacists who can embrace programming skills in the areas of data analytics, like learning SQL or Python or R, because there's so much data in healthcare, but there's so much domain expertise required to understand what's happening. Like this is just kind of a micro example to kind of illustrate the issue. So I remember hearing about a large analysis that was done on a patient population, and technically gabapentin is a calcium channel blocker, like how it works. And so in some drug lexicons, it's a calcium channel blocker. But anyway, they were doing this study on like hypertension patients, And, the data analyst who didn't have a healthcare, background, basically everyone on gabapentin was coded into this like hypertension analysis. And like, it's such a simple thing that like a pharmacist with just some data analytic skills, would have been able to contribute greatly to. And so that was just a small example of there's tons of demand in my mind. Well, or at least there'll be budding demand for pharmacists who understand how to work with data and are willing to interface with that at their current workplaces, or certainly, hopefully, there's going to be more future linear paths towards future opportunities for pharmacists to utilize those skills.
And Derek, short of someone pursuing like I know there's informatics residency programs and other things out there. So in lieu of someone pursuing that formal training opportunity, when I hear you, talk about things like SQL and Python, which are a foreign language to me, and obviously, as we'll get to here in a moment, the work that you're doing in building your own business, like the learning curve of that seems astronomical. And I can tell you're obviously a self-initiator. Clearly, you have a desire and passion to want to learn. But what does that look like in terms of how you've been able to acquire and develop these skills? Has that all been self-taught? Has it been mentors? Has it been training programs? Tell us more about how you were able to overcome that learning curve of the work that you are doing now, and obviously the gap that was there from the traditional pharmacy degree.
I'm so glad you asked this, because it's actually one of my favorite things to harp on, what I'm about to say. And it wasn't intuitive to me at first, which, so some background on my domains here. So it was while I was in pharmacy school, once I started that internship at MyMeds, a mentor there, he said to me, "Hey, Derek, you really love giving, suggestions on, what sorts of features we should be adding into our, our website and app. If you're curious, I think one way that you could help our engineers better understand the ideas you're giving them is that if you were to start learning some programming too, so that you could, have some of their language, under your, so you could have some of their vernacular." And I was like, I thought that seemed, preposterous. Like, I would need a computer science degree. But it's really funny. So I did take his advice and started learning just some really basic website development on, like, Khan Academy was the first website I started learning on. And software engineering or programming, just the aforementioned skills I mentioned, they're just like any other domain. But I think they seem to us as pharmacists, I think it seems uniquely like opaque of an area to learn. But, no one bats an eye at a pharmacist getting a Juris Doctor degree or an MBA,
that's
or
right,
an MPH, or all this, that's perfectly normal. But programming, and I was the same way. But it's actually no different. And actually, in my mind, it's easier to learn. As clinicians, one of the main things I was concerned about was, you can't learn to be a clinician without actually going to school for it, because you need to be able to see patients. And so you need to be in a system that allows you to train your clinical knowledge with patients. Website development, programming, that takes place on a computer. And so you can start learning on any computer you're on. That being said, I don't necessarily think it's like any skill where if it resonates with you, that's going to help you learn more. Like, just don't tell anybody, Tim, or anybody listening, I actually really don't like the business aspect of my business. The books and, how much, the bottom, all that stuff, like the MBA, quote unquote, knowledge of running this business, I don't find it very interesting. But I love programming. And so I would just say anyone who thinks they might be interested in learning some technical skills, it's just as approachable as any other domain, and you'll find out whether or not it resonates with you. Yeah,
and Derek, your differential advantage is obviously the skills you've acquired plus your degree and background as a pharmacist, right? So as I think about you as a business owner, sure, as you're getting started, a lot of that stress and work is going to fall on you. But as you grow, like that's stuff you hire out, and you probably already are. Like, what you bring is your differential advantage as a business. And I think naturally, if we fast forward 5 years, like Derek isn't in the weeds on any of that, because your time spent and the impact you're going to have on your prospective customers is going to be bringing your unique skill set, right? Not worrying about the books and other things. So
100%. I very much subscribe to the philosophy of, double down on your strengths and collaborate for your weaknesses.
Yeah.
And so that's totally how I view it as well.
So were you working as you're developing and acquiring these skills, and we're going to bridge that to the work that you're doing right now in building Cosmas Health, but were you working as a community pharmacist alongside of this journey? So you're essentially side hustling your way into the beginning of the business. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, totally. So that's another interesting story. I think just how I'll just say so many, even guests you have on this show, Tim, and yourself, so many of us fall into our current position, backwards, sideways. I have no idea what the one thing we need to solve is in the pharmacy profession is how to create more linear paths to non-traditional careers. But what happened on my end is, I would say, I was actually, one thing I remember doing my first few years of pharmacy school was taking part of like the NCPA business plan competition. So, entrepreneurship was something I think I was interested in. Actually, my dad and grandfather and uncles and aunts, they own a small business, but I was around it. But I wasn't the kid who was selling candy out of my locker or anything. And so really it was when I discovered my interest for technology startups that I started to consider, I think I do want to start my own business someday, but once that idea hits me is when I'll start working on it. And so, yeah, after graduation in 2018, I knew I wanted to work full-time at a startup. And so, but MyMeds, it didn't quite work yet for me to work full-time there. So I started working full-time as a pharmacist at Walgreens. And in my nights and weekends, I would still help out at MyMeds, as much as I could. But then after about 6 months, I was sort of able to reverse the roles so this is about December after graduation. I was now full-time as a product manager at MyMeds, but then I was still a market pharmacist, a float pharmacist at Walgreens, just actually up until this last summer. And so throughout the course of 2019 is when I actually started to, in my nights and weekends, program the concept I had for Pyrls, which is the primary product that my business builds and what I'm working on today. And so, yeah, that was the beginnings of that transition.
And that's one of the reasons why I asked the question, Derek, because that's one of the things I love about pharmacy as a profession. For those that maybe have an idea that they're itching to pursue, is there's very few jobs out there that you can potentially work PRN and flex that. Maybe it's full-time to start. Maybe it's eventually 30, 20, 15 hours, especially if you're a great pharmacist, have a good relationship, with your district manager and your store's performing all that. Like, it can be a really good bridge and a darn, good paying bridge as you're looking at exploring other opportunities. So you mentioned working full-time in the pharmacy, kind of part-time nights and weekends on some of the business ideas and stuff. And then obviously over time, that had flipped. So I think that's a great example for others to consider. Now, it's one thing, Derek, to pursue a non-traditional career path and be willing to take that leap of faith in both learning and belief in yourself, and to do that hopefully as an employee where you earn a good wage. It's a whole nother thing to say, I'm going to pursue this non-traditional career path and I'm going to own my own business, right? And I think that hurdle for many people is a big hurdle to get over for a variety of reasons. So tell us about what happened in 2019 that you said, hey, I'm going to start this company, Cosmas Health, and how you were able to get over that hurdle to get started.
Yeah, so it actually, as I mentioned, I'd been sort of learning some programming skills as early as during the middle of pharmacy school, but towards the end of pharmacy school, especially in my fourth year, just like learning programming, like website and app development, became like an obsession. I remember very vividly like going to rotations from 7 to 3 or 8 to 4, coming home, taking a nap, and then like coding for like 4 hours because it was like the most fun thing I could ever think of doing. So by the time I graduated, I was a like relatively competent web developer. So yeah, in 2019, when I was still sort of thinking about ideas for starting my own business, I created Cosmas Health, which is, just as a Minnesota LLC, so I could do freelance web development work out of, which I know you've talked to many other pharmacists on here who've started their own. I recommend anyone, as soon as you have any sort of thing you may want to do, form a business, around it just to get yourself started, if other factors make sense regarding it. So I created my own business that I was doing some freelance work out of, but then I started building my own projects within that. And so Pyrls, which is the primary product that I build today, it's essentially like a digital version of those top 400 drug study cards, plus some other features. We're working towards building, sort of a next generation drug information reference, like the ones that we rely on today in practice. And so the idea for it started, I was thinking about it while I was on fourth year, like on Appy's, like building a better reference for me to use there. And so it was one of the projects I started just sort of hacking on in my nights and weekends, as I mentioned. And anyway, I started to get some traction with it to the point where this was in the fall of 2019. I was pretty much like, I need to go all in on this. And so I basically planned where I still kept my position at Walgreens that I was, 1 or 2 weekends a month, but then I could pick up shifts as needed if available. And so in January 2020, I just sort of, I had some money saved up, but, still had some huge student loans and, big thanks to sort of my, my supportive now wife, kind of jumped out of the airplane without a parachute in January 2020. I'd love to talk about some of the struggles of especially that first year with trying to build and grow Pyrls. But it was what I sort of use, again, any quote you attribute to anybody, I'm sure was said by somebody else too. But the person I saw mention this was, so Jeff Bezos talks a lot about this regret minimization framework he has, where he's trying to make a decision. He says, am I going to regret on my deathbed? What am I going to think of this decision? And so for me, it was like, could I picture myself at age 40 having not yet taken the leap to start my own business? It's like, nope. So no matter where I'm at with everything, I'm young right now. I have some money saved up. I have some runway here. And so in January 2020 is when I said, all right, let's do it. I'm going to go full time on this business. And so while still, actually, like as you mentioned, having the comfort of, I'm so grateful for the role I was able to have as a pharmacist at at Walgreens while I was, growing my business towards, a place to be sustainable, fully full time.
I'm glad you mentioned, I've never heard that terminology, the regret minimization framework. Tim Ferriss talks about that concept, essentially the essence of that was really critical for me in my own journey as well. And, he talks about it a lot in terms of, yes, what might you think looking backwards, but also like really trying to objectively call the fears that you have. And through that process, you realize that many of the fears that you might have are not rational, right? And that's really part of the process of really trying to put those on paper and really looking at them as objectively as you can. But Derek, my question is that you still made that leap. So you alluded to savings, but many pharmacists, even if they have savings, if they're looking at big student loan debt, perhaps there's a family, I've got to save for retirement. I feel all these competing pressures. There's this known thing of a good 6-figure income, and there's this unknown thing, which has risk, but also upside in a business. So I want to dig a layer deeper, even with a little bit of savings, like how were you able to lean into that and feel comfortable? And as you said, kind of flying out of the plane without a parachute.
Yeah, I think for better and for worse, I'm a major optimist, but also I tend to sort of think and plan for my life in really short-term terms. So I was, when I started full-time, like I said, in January 2020, I was like, well, we'll see how this goes and we'll reevaluate it in 3 months and then I can make a decision from there. And so, like I mentioned, this is certainly a very personal decision, but for me, there was no better time. It was only going to get harder to make a riskier decision the more savings I saved up or the more I climbed the corporate ladder. It was only going to get harder to risk, or if we have children, it was only going to get harder to risk that. And so that combined with, as I mentioned, I was very lucky to be and have a very supportive partner how we actually kind of structured things financially was either through my business and or working extra pharmacy shifts. I had to make sure that I could cover half of all of our expenses. And if I couldn't do that, then I need to stop. And so that was sort of the rules of the game for myself, or the bounds of the risk I could take. And so having a plan like that, I think helps with the decision as well. Because all right, I've made this decision that we're going to play by these rules, and then we're going to act next based upon, what happens.
I really like that, having some ground rules, having some structure. My follow-up here is you alluded to a struggle in that first year. And I think, any new business is going to have some growing pains in the first year financially, as well as just kind of what you're trying to build in the operations of the business. But this is an area we don't talk a whole lot about in entrepreneurship. I think there's so much, maybe over glorification to some degree, of people who make this jump, right? And other people are like, oh man, I want to do that. But what we don't hear as much, and what we probably don't share as much of, it's really hard, to build something, not only in terms of the time and the sweat and the energy, but also, some of the financial struggles and challenges that can come. And it takes some real mental fortitude and I think belief in yourself and what you're trying to build to really be able to overcome some of those fears and challenges in the first year. So tell me more about, for you, Derek, and for Cosmas Health, and perhaps more specifically your primary product in Pyrls, what some of those struggles were in that first year.
Oh my God. I'm just smiling over here as you were saying all that, because I remember before launching the first version of Pyrls, which again, for the reference for the audience. So Pyrls is, it's a drug information tool, for pharmacists, for pharmacy students. It's not for patients, it's aimed at clinicians. And so I remember thinking oh, this is going to be so easy, Tim. We're going to launch this, and I just need 10,000 people to pay $100 a year, and that's $1 million. There's over 300,000 pharmacists. So that's just a tiny percentage of them. And so I'm just going to launch this, and then everyone's going to be like, wow, this is super cool, and sign up, and wow, it's going to go great. Nobody cares about what you're doing. That's one of the hardest things to learn with businesses. You can be super excited about what you're doing, but nobody else has to be. And so I remember, the first, let's just go back to January 2020 when I went full time on this. That's actually when Pyrls was officially launched to the public as well. And I remember getting ready to launch this new feature in February. And we had a pretty good Instagram following at the time. So we have an Instagram account where we share medication facts. It's at pyrls.app. And so we maybe had a few thousand followers at that point. And so I remember getting ready to and we were reasonably sure it was mostly pharmacy students, pharmacists, our target audience. And so one of the strategies we use for a number of reasons is we have a free tier. We try to get people to just sign up for free. And so I remember getting ready to launch this feature, and all of the ad or the text around the promotion was just sign up for free and check this all out. And I remember launching it on Instagram. We made a post, stories were there, and I'm sure we made stories. And I remember 24 hours went by and not a single person even signed up, let alone a sale.
You're like, it's free. Come on.
Yeah. And I remember just being like, wow, this is going to be, honestly, I don't know how I wasn't more discouraged. I think just what I'm most happy about nowadays, and sorry, I don't mean to take us in a different direction, but
no, it's good stuff.
I'm so happy that 2 years into this, I'm actually more excited about what I'm doing now than I was when I started. And that's really important. I could have found that, the business could be doing 10 times better than it is now, but if I wasn't enjoying it, that would be hard. It'd be hard to wake up and dread my day. And so I think that's obviously a really critical part of starting something new when you don't know if you have traction or you don't know if the business is going to work, is you better be loving it. And so I certainly was loving it. And so it was, all of 2020 was a slow, just the growth kind of, I don't know if it's the combination of, I think, with any new business, I think there's actually, you might know, Tim, I don't know if this might be something I'm pulling out of my head, but I remember seeing like a marketing rule of thumb that was like, people don't respond to your ad until like the 6th time they see something or something. So I don't know if it's just a factor of being around long enough to start getting the compounding growth, and or obviously as you build your business, you're going to learn what people actually find valuable and double down on that.
Yeah. And Derek, to that point, there can be a lot of head trash, at least I'm speaking for myself and other pharmacy entrepreneurs I talk with on a regular basis, that we tend to look at our audience and what they want through our own lens and our passion and how we're sending content out and marketing materials and other things. And that is not how they're looking at it, right? So if I think about your avatar client, Derek, of what I know of your business, like they have a million things going on in the day, right? With their work, with family, with other things. And so when they see that, Instagram story, or they see an ad for like a free Pyrls app, you're looking at it through lens of like, man, this is a home run. Like I know the value, I built this, I know how it competes with everything out there. Same thing with our end on financial services, piece of content, whatever it be. Like that's one small snippet of their day. It's everything in my day of what I'm passionate about and working on. And so I think that we may tend to under promote our content out of fear of like, am I being annoying? Am I sending out too much content? But really seeing some of that data, and Grant Cardone talks about this of like, most folks from a business standpoint have an obscurity problem that people don't know who they are, and they may think that people know who they are. And, it's finding that balance, of course, of what you're comfortable with. But, I think that resonates with me of what you shared in terms of the number of times that people might have to see something.
I got to share one more thing on that, Tim, too. So I remember, or this is something I will tell like so I have one employee now and a few interns. And this is something I like when I'm onboarding people, I'll talk to them about how, because I learned this for myself, it is such a miracle anytime somebody pays for your product. Because I said like a lot of our users of Pyrls, they'll find us on, let's just say Instagram's honestly a really common place for them to find us. I was like, all right, picture, and I would say like most of our customers are like 4th-year pharmacy students or 1st-year new practitioners. And so I was like, picture our user. They're in New York riding the subway to school, and they may be looking at Instagram and they see, a post Pyrls makes, and they click on our profile, and then they're about to go to our website and buy, but then they got to their subway stop. And
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Let's say that they even signed up. Okay. And they're at the checkout page. Say they even think to themselves, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. It costs $40. Well, I'd pay $100 for this. But their dog starts barking. And then they forget about it because they have to go take care of their dog. So, the process of building a business there's so many factors, and just, putting in the work is ultimately, how you get the full cycle going. And I just encourage people not to be discouraged by any one little thing,
You're so spot on. I mean, the subway example is so good, right? Because I often say, hey, man, there's 330,000 pharmacists out there, and I'm so confident in the solution that we have. But, what you shared is like, I hope I never lose that appreciation and admiration and gratitude for someone that, not only follows us and engages with the community, but ultimately makes that decision to trust us to provide a service or a product that we offer. Like, I never want to take that for granted, because what it takes of 330,000 people to actually get your content out in front of eyes. You're already kind of working down the funnel there. Those that then take action on it, are able to invest the time to read your content, follow your content, and ultimately make that decision to purchase. And, to me as a business owner, like that's the ultimate, vote of confidence in what you're doing, is to raise, their hand and to purchase something, to trust you with product or a service. And I'm just hopeful, as I can tell in your voice of gratitude, like I'm hopeful to never lose that as a business owner, because it's so special. It really is.
I would do anything for my customers. They can call me any time of day. I'll come pick them up if they're stranded on the highway. Yes, I share your sentiment of gratitude so deeply.
So, Derek, I'm curious, and we're going to link to in the show notes, and I hope folks will check it out if they haven't already. Derek, you've mentioned Cosmas Health. We'll link to that, cosmashealth.com in the show notes. That really was the LLC that you created to start freelance work. Pyrls, which is Pyrls.com. We'll link to that as well as the Instagram at Pyrls.app you mentioned in the show notes so folks can check those out. As I look at the work that you're doing, I ask this of any business owner that I talk to, which is what differentiates your product from what is out there in the market. Now, it's been some time for me since I've been in a pharmacy working with a patient or in an ambulatory care setting, but I think about traditional tools that I trained with, right? Whether that's Lexicomp, Micromedics, UpToDate, other tools. Like, what really differentiates the Pyrls product and what problem is Pyrls really trying to solve that, again, we're hoping to entrust folks support that they invest in this resource among others that are out there?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, the original idea, drug information reference, that these have been around since, stone tablets, I'm sure. But so the rendition that we're building now, my original inspiration started while I was on rotations. I was in particular, as a fourth year, interested in a faster reference for like counseling points and or clinical Pyrls, hence the pun there. And so the two or three most common things that differentiates Pyrls right now is number one, the counseling points. So, we have a custom set of curated counseling points for all medications. And that's by far the most common feature that our users love is they look up a drug and go check out the counseling points, whether they're studying or on site. And it actually was really fun in the early days of Pyrls getting to use, like I'd be at the drive-through on the phone with the patient, counseling, and in my hand I'd have Pyrls like looking down at it, take it with food. And so the counseling points. And then the next piece is, helping decide. We have a really popular section for most medications called place in therapy, where, hey, you're looking at this ACE inhibitor. Well, yeah, that's for hypertension, but like, when is this used versus another first-line hypertension agent? So we have nice summaries of guidelines for chronic conditions. There's about 2,000 drugs or so that actually matter. And right now, Pyrls only covers about 400 of them. And so we cover for the most part, the most commonly prescribed medications. And so that's the area that, we're focused on. Like, if you're an orthopedic surgeon, Pyrls doesn't have much utility for you now. And so how we're thinking about expanding is, so whereas traditional references sort of organize information kind of just like a book would, where it's like a table of contents, we sort of organize information around workflows, like counseling a patient, or, you need to decide prescribing or reviewing. Essentially, you need to understand those place and therapy concepts. So that's what differentiates us now is the information for specific workflows. And where we're headed is building that out for more drugs and for more workflows.
Love it. Love it. And I can see as I look at your website, just an opportunity to continue to expand upon the awesome work that you've done. Derek, my question for you is I hear you talk about your journey, from idea to obviously getting the product out there that you use yourself when you were working at, Walgreens, to now having an employee and obviously having some interns, and the growth that you have planned going forward. Is what support or infrastructure of support have you had as a business owner? So has this been all learn as you go? Obviously beyond the tech side, I'm thinking about, as I look at your website, there's of course the web design, to be able to take purchases, looking at your pricing tiers and structures. There's a marketing aspect, there's a strategy piece, there's a business development portion, there's an HR piece as you're hiring. Are you going at this alone? Do you have like a group of entrepreneurs or an incubator or something that is supporting you along the way? Tell us more about the support you have as a business owner.
Yeah. So, other people have certainly, mentors have, like most people, mentors have been just, I can't even put into words how influential and responsible for any success that Pyrls has had so far. So, pretty much everything you just mentioned, marketing, finding customers, solving problems, learning through the experiences of entrepreneurs who went through it or who are farther along has been so huge for me. Yeah, Pyrls has been, fortunately, over in 2021. So we went through an accelerator out in San Francisco over the summer, which connected myself personally with tons of other founders in the technology industry. And so that, from the business growing side of things, has been very beneficial. But honestly, the support of the pharmacy community has been probably the main thing for Pyrls' success thus far. The most important thing in my mind is, the integrity of our content, and I think the trust in the information is probably the most that's the most important pillar of the house we're building. And so, talking to other leaders of medical information companies who are entrusted with with a similar responsibility of their product has been the most, I would say. That's what I think of as just people.
Yeah, I love it. I love what you've built, Derek. I love the passion you have behind the work that you're doing. Also, just my business partner, Tim Baker, and I often talk about, we love the puzzle of business. We just love the challenge, opportunity to develop products and services that hopefully meet the needs of the community. And I can tell you've got, that passion as well. I'm excited to see where this builds out in the next several years. Hopefully we can have you back on the podcast and share some of that growth with the community. We will link to a Pyrls website, the Instagram account for folks that already wear. They can check that out and share the good news. Beyond that, Derek, what is the best place that folks can go to learn more about you and to follow the journey?
Yeah, well, any pharmacist who's either interested in, a business idea they have, or talking to other pharmacists in non-traditional roles, or interested in, honestly, like I said, if I had 9 lives to live, most of them would be in a different pharmacy role. So if you're somebody who thinks that, we could have something interesting to talk about, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Derek Borkowski, PharmD. And so would love to connect there, as well as, please, if you, to whatever degree of interest anyone has, follow our Instagram at pyrls.app. And Tim, thank you for everything you're doing, bringing, voices like mine onto your show, and all the other inspirational and super important, advice and information that your financial pharmacist puts out into the world.
My pleasure, Derek. Thank you so much for taking time to come on the show. And I'm so glad our paths have crossed. So thank you again.
Likewise. Thanks, Tim.
As we conclude this week's podcast, an important reminder that the content on this show is provided to you for informational purposes only and is not intended to provide and should not be relied on for investment or any other advice. Information in the podcast and corresponding materials should not be construed as a solicitation or offer to buy or sell any investment or related financial products. We urge listeners to consult with a financial advisor with respect to any investment. Furthermore, the information contained in our archived newsletters, blog posts, and podcasts is not updated and may not be accurate at the time you listen to it on the podcast. Opinions and analyses expressed herein are solely those of your financial pharmacist unless otherwise noted, and constitute judgments as of the dates published. Such information may contain forward-looking statements which are not intended to be guarantees of future events. Actual results could differ materially from those anticipated in the forward-looking statements. For more information, please visit yourfinancialpharmacist.com/disclaimer. Thank you again for your support of the Your Financial Pharmacist podcast. Have a great rest of your week.